Okay, so the judiciary. Okay, now as we've seen a few times now, the Constitution is not purely democratic. I mean, the Electoral College was a good example of that. The judiciary is designed not to be democratic. Okay, that's the whole point of having an independent judiciary. So the federal judiciary, meaning the entire federal court system, which at the very top is the Supreme Court, or which culminates in the Supreme Court as the most important court, as the final court in the land for both federal and state. So in other words, anything in the federal court system can be appealed, and if it goes up to the Supreme Court, then that's the final court. Also, things from state courts, when they go to state Supreme Courts, you can appeal them beyond a state Supreme Court to the federal Supreme Court. In both cases, that's the final court of appeal. In the federal judiciary, you have an independent judiciary. This was the point. They wanted the judges to be totally independent. What does that mean? It means that they have lifetime tenure with good behavior. The way that that phrase, with good behavior, in other words, once you're appointed a federal judge, you have that job for life as long as you maintain good behavior. And the way that that's usually interpreted actually is as long as you're not selling drugs out of your office or something, you will be left in. Again, the point here is to have an independent judiciary. So federal judges never have to be elected, and they never have to be reelected. They never have to be reappointed by Congress or by the president. And again, the idea here is independent. Make them independent, make them so that they're not reliant on anybody else. They don't have to worry about what's popular. They don't have to worry about making the president happy. They don't have to worry about making Congress happy. They can just focus on interpreting the law, okay? Why do they do this? Because again, take the Supreme Court decision, Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. The Supreme Court ruling that said segregation is unconstitutional. This was made in 1954. Imagine if the Supreme Court justices had had to run for re-election in 1956, along with when Eisenhower did. Would they all have been re-elected? Would any of them have been re-elected? Do you really want segregation, decisions about whether or not segregation is constitutional? Do you really want these things decided by elections? The whole point of, remember, we have democracy in the United States, obviously, which means rule of the majority, but we have liberal democracy, which again means there are protections for individual liberties. And what sort of liberties need to be protected? Well, basically the rights of unpopular minorities. So the rights of the majority usually don't need to be protected in a democracy because they're the majority. It's the rights of the minorities, it's the rights of unpopular groups or groups that can be exploited for gain that really need to be protected. And that's why the judiciary is undemocratic, because the whole point is for them to protect the personal liberties, the personal rights that need protecting. And again, by definition, those will almost always be the rights of minorities. They will almost always be unpopular rights. So in other words, it's all laid out in the Bill of Rights, especially the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Well, what religions need protection? Well, you could say to some extent all of them do, but obviously it's unpopular religions that need protection more than popular ones. Freedom of speech, what sort of opinions need protection? Well, if you say, I love puppies, you're probably never going to have somebody try to pass a law stopping you from talking about how you love puppies. Or if you say America is great, these are fairly popular opinions. It's the unpopular opinions that need to be protected. This is the whole point of the Constitution, the whole point of having a Bill of Rights. And again, the whole point of having an independent judiciary is you want judges who are not reliant on the people, who don't need to worry about being elected or re-elected, and again, who don't need to worry about being reappointed by the president or by Congress. Okay? So this is the idea, independent, not democratic judiciary. But that being said, it is dependent on the executive to carry out its rulings, so that the Supreme Court has a great deal of power in terms of interpreting the Constitution or enforcing it, but it has very little power in terms of actually getting the government to do anything. So it is dependent on the executive to enforce its ruling. There was an early ruling in the 1820s, I think it was in the 1820s, where the Supreme Court ruled in favor of an Indian tribe in a dispute they were having with the state of Georgia, but Andrew Jackson refused to actually carry out the ruling. He let the state of Georgia do what it wanted with the Indian tribe. 1954, Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court said segregation is unconstitutional, but it wasn't until Eisenhower sent soldiers, sent the National Guard into Little Rock, Arkansas to desegregate a school, and ultimately until Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and President Johnson signed it into law. That's when these things really started to happen. The Supreme Court ruling by itself, though very important, had relatively little power in terms of actually compelling people to do things. Okay, and again, Hamilton wrote most of these on the judiciary, but Hamilton Publius says, yes, clearly the Supreme Court is meant to limit the power of the other two branches, especially the legislative. It's Congress who passes laws. What does the Supreme Court largely do? It reviews laws to see if they're constitutional. It strikes them down if it thinks that they're unconstitutional. So clearly it's limiting the power of the other branches, especially Congress. But Publius is very emphatic. That's not because the Supreme Court is somehow above all the other branches or because it's some sort of super branch of government. It's not. The idea is the Constitution is superior to all the branches of government, and the Supreme Court is the branch of government that is charged with really focusing on interpreting and, in a sense, enforcing the Constitution. Okay, so again, the Constitution is above all the others, and the Supreme Court is the one that needs to actually focus on the Constitution and say, is what Congress doing constitutional? Is this law constitutional? Yes, it was passed by the people's representatives. However, in this country, simple democracy is not supreme. The rule of the majority is not supreme. We do have a Constitution, and even if these laws were passed by the people's representatives, are they unconstitutional in some way? And again, the Supreme Court then can strike it down if it says that it is. If they decide that a law is unconstitutional, they can strike it down. And again, they don't have to worry about being reelected or reappointed. So does that mean that ultimately decisions about what is constitutional and what is not rest with this undemocratic body, the Supreme Court? Yes, but of course there's a way to change the Constitution. If the Supreme Court comes up with a ruling that is so unpopular, people can amend the Constitution. So the Supreme Court says this law is unconstitutional. If people feel that strongly about the fact that that law should, that they really want that law to exist, even if the Supreme Court says that it's unconstitutional, then they can always amend the Constitution, which is a democratic process. It goes through Congress and through the states. So ultimately, authority over the Constitution rests with the people. The Supreme Court is charged with interpreting the Constitution, but the people, their representatives, can always change the Constitution by amending it. Okay, it's very difficult to do. The next couple of slides talk about that. You need a 2/3 vote in each house to propose an amendment, and then it gets sent out to the states, and it needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So that's relatively rare. There are only 20-some amendments because it is hard to actually pass an amendment. But again, ultimately, control over the Constitution is democratic. People can amend the Constitution if they feel that strongly about it. But again, it is difficult because the idea is, well, you want a stable Constitution. You don't want something that's being amended and reworked every couple of years. Okay, and finally then judicial review. This is another way that the Constitution can, in a sense, be changed. There's the process of formal amendment when you actually write a new amendment and you add it to the Constitution. But when the Supreme Court interprets laws, when it interprets the Constitution and strikes down laws or upholds them, the Supreme Court writes decisions explaining their rationale, and those decisions become important. We'll talk about this much more when we talk about the Supreme Court in a few weeks. These decisions become important for future decisions. So the Constitution is in a way changed, or you could say expanded or clarified by the Supreme Court. This is judicial review. So again, sometimes it's the states or even Congress will pass a law. They think that it's constitutional. When that's struck down and the Supreme Court says, no, it's not constitutional, in a sense, the Constitution has been changed then because something has been made explicit, which was not explicit before. And this power that the Supreme Court has of judicial review was first established by the Supreme Court itself in a Supreme Court decision called Marbury v. Madison in the very early 19th century. So again, the Constitution can be changed by formal amendment, but also by judicial review when the courts make decisions that basically changes what we know, it basically changes the Constitution, sometimes in dramatic ways by saying, no, the Constitution actually means this, sometimes in more subtle ways by sort of clarifying certain points in the Constitution. But judicial review is a way in which the Constitution is changed, modified, our understanding of the Constitution, the way that the Constitution actually works, what it actually, the effects it actually has on politics are changed by judicial review as well as by formal amendments.